Jenna Henderson was just a freshman in high school when she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. She battled the same cancer 2 separate times and then went into remission for 13 years. But just 3 years into her marriage, her cancer came back with a vengeance.
Scott and Jenna Henderson were active youth leaders in their church when they found out Jenna had a reoccurrence of ovarian cancer. She was 30 years old when she lost her fight against the disease. Scott published Jenna's journal entries in the book, Worth the Suffering, which chronicles Jenna's passing from this world to the next. Through her suffering, Jenna shares her stories of finding hope, joy, and peace with God.
Please welcome to the 700 Club her husband, Scott Henderson. Scott, how nice to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate you welcoming me here.
Well, how did you and Jenna respond when you received the word that the cancer had returned? I mean, here you are 3 years into your marriage. Right. You're young. I'm sure you've got thoughts of planning for a family and much, much more. How did you guys handle that?
Yeah, so it was really devastating. I mean, it was beyond what anyone could comprehend. And so knowing that was the case, it was, now what? Now what can we do? And so we leaned into our community. We leaned into to our faith. And so that was where we sat. And what is God going to do? What miracle is he going to bring?
And in the middle of all of that, or I should say through all of it, Jenna blogged and really shared from her heart the things that she was feeling with unbelievable candor. What kinds of things did that blogging reveal about the journey?
So she was always joyful, and she would always find ways to be thankful. And so no matter what she was dealing with or what the news was, she was always excited about how God was moving, about her relationship with the Lord, and just to know that he was going to be faithful regardless of what was the outcome.
And this held true, really, maybe even more so when it was evident that the outcome was not going to be what you prayed and hoped it would be.
Yeah, so we actually never gave up hope. We always expected God to do something big. How great it would be for everyone to see Jenna and her story and to get to witness that miracle. When that didn't happen, it became pretty evident that now what? Now, where is God in this? And even to the very end, her last week in the hospital, she was getting ready to go on a trip. And so we were still expectantly faithful that the Lord was going to show up and do something big.
Yeah. Speaking of those last days in the hospital and going on a trip, she kind of was preparing for 2 trips.
Yeah.
And she used to say, I'm DNR.
Yes. DNR. She did.
And that was because, to explain what she said to the doctors.
When she says, I'm DNR, that just means do not resuscitate. And so she knew that if things were to go bad and she was to be in that position, she didn't want to be brought back. She wanted to go be with Jesus. She thought there's nothing worse that could happen is me hanging out with Jesus and then be brought back to this.
Especially because she had a lot of pain.
Yeah, there was a lot of pain that came with the cancer.
Yeah. Scott, how did you, I guess this would apply to both of you, but since you're the one
right
that Jesus has put here to talk to us today, how did you deal with hanging on to hope when things kept going south? I mean, that's such a hard thing. You know, we tell people believe for a miracle, believe for healing, but not everybody gets healed.
Right. So it was really, really difficult until I got to be with Jenna in that, because she was always the one that would say, hey, but look at how good God is in this.
Yeah.
And so to be in that mood where things aren't going well, with her, it was near impossible to be that way because she was so joyful. Yeah. She was so expectant. And so in that regard, it wasn't difficult at all when she wasn't doing well to sit by her side. On the other side of things, after she had passed, to hold on to hope, it was very, very difficult. Wrestling with how is God good when he allows his faithful daughter to go through something and then not have the outcome we had thought would happen.
Yeah. Her friends also in the book write very poignantly about her impact on their lives. Jenna impacted everybody who knew her, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
Yeah, that was a very wise thing to put in here, I thought, because you have Jenna's blog, you have comments from Jenna's friends, and then you have prayers that Jenna prayed.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the impact and influence she had on people.
So anytime that Jenna would walk into the room, she would be joyful, but in a quiet, subtle way. And so you couldn't have a bad day with her in the room because her joy was just, she had so many favorites. Everything was her favorite. But her impact was beyond that. She actually cared about the heart, and she cared about what people were going through. And so even on the last week of her life, she'd be laying in the hospital bed and really just sedated. But she would, anytime someone would walk in the room, she would ask a question about that person's life, or ask something like, how are you today? Instead of focusing on her and her pain, she would always have that outward reflection.
Lived outside of herself, yeah. There are some priceless lessons, you say, that come from suffering. And Jenna said that, that there were many things that couldn't have been gained any other way. What are some of those?
So for me, there's been a couple. I have learned on the other side how to serve and how to love. And so in my grief, one of the things that I learned how to do well was to still love and serve her. So even to this day, even this book, things I've done at my home are in love to serve her. The other thing that I've learned is that even when the miracle doesn't happen, God is still good and he is still faithful. Because in the way that this book was titled, Worth the Suffering, she had always said, if I get to know God at the end of this, well, it's all worth the suffering. But she also said, if one person's life is changed for eternity and get to know Jesus because of my cancer, it's worth it.
Wow.
And so God is still good because his glory is still being shown through her book and through her story.
In situations like this, it's maybe the ultimate trust because you're not seeing what you want to see. You're not receiving the answer you want to receive. You're holding on to the promises of God. Is that the takeaway for this book, that the promises are real?
Absolutely. Without God and his promises. So I went through a time where I was questioning everything after Jenna had passed away. But because of God and his promises, I have hope. I have restoration. I have redemption in this story. And when I focus on the here and now, life can get pretty muddied down and not the best. But when I think about the eternal promises that God has for me and for us, there's no better way than to share Jenna's story and to share his hope with everybody.
Well, I just want to say Worth the Suffering is a tremendous book. If you're experiencing a struggle with your own health, and it's serious, if you know someone else that is, and even if you just want to understand what it's like to walk down that road, this is not a sad book. This is a book about victory. It's a book about rejoicing, and it's a book that has a message for each and every one of us. It's called Worth the Suffering. It's available wherever books are sold. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you here.
Really
Great
appreciate
book.
it. Thanks.